Imagine it's Christmas Eve, somewhere around 1962. The living room glows with soft yellow light, the kind that only old bulbs and tinsel reflections can make. The air smells of pine needles and cinnamon, and from the kitchen drifts something even better, that unmistakable mix of butter, nutmeg, and sweet anticipation. The radio hums with Bing Crosby's velvet voice, the same song that's been played every December since you were knee-high. You can almost hear the faint scratch of the vinyl as White Christmas fills the house like a warm blanket. There's Grandma at the counter, her apron dusted in flour, glasses slipping down her nose as she squints at a faded recipe card written in looping cursive. The kind of handwriting that belongs to another time, when folks measured ingredients with their hearts, not a digital scale. She hums along as she stirs, the wooden spoon clicking rhythmically against the old Pyrex bowl. Every cupboard smells faintly of vanilla and spice, and the windows fog over from the oven's steady heat. And out there, just beyond the kitchen door, the whole world is slowing down. Snow's coming down thick and lazy outside, muffling the sound of passing cars. The tree twinkles in the corner, dressed in mismatched ornaments that have seen decades of Decembers. The TV hums softly with "It's a Wonderful Life," and somewhere a child is trying to stay awake long enough to hear sleigh bells. That was Christmas in America, a time when every casserole dish told a story. Every ribbon loaf and cranberry salad held a secret family tradition. When neighbors swapped tins of cookies instead of texts, and the kitchen was the heart of the home. But as the decades rolled on, microwaves, diet trends, and ready-made meals crept in, and slowly, those recipes that once defined our holidays began to disappear. So today, we're pulling open the old oven door of memory to revisit 25 forgotten Christmas dishes that once filled American tables with laughter, warmth, and the kind of flavor that only comes from love and time. From shimmering Jell-O molds to Coca-Cola glazed hams, these aren't just recipes, they're pieces of who we used to be. So go ahead, pour yourself a mug of cocoa, settle by the fire, and let's take a long, sweet walk back into the kitchens of Christmas past. Jell-O Christmas Salad. You could spot it from across the dining room, that shimmering red and green tower of wobbly wonder, quivering like it had stage fright under the Christmas lights. Every 1950s hostess worth her pearls had a Jell-O mold chilling in the fridge, layered with crushed pineapple, cherries, cottage cheese, and sometimes even shredded carrots, because back then vegetables were fair game in dessert. When that glossy mold was flipped onto the platter, it caught the glow of the fairy lights like stained glass from a church window. The sound of it releasing, that soft suction pop, was oddly satisfying, like the dinner bell for joy. The first bite, cool, sweet, tangy, a perfect counterpoint to all the heavy roasts and gravies crowding the table. Kids waited for it the way you'd wait for dessert's drum roll, giggling as it wiggled on their plates. Sure, it was a little strange by modern standards, but that was the fun of it. Food didn't just taste good, it looked like Christmas. And in an age before fancy gadgets and store-bought cheesecakes, a homemade Jell-O salad was a badge of pride. Each slice held not just flavor, but love, patience, and a touch of mid-century magic. the kind that only existed in kitchens that smelled like sugar and hope. Ambrosia heaven. Now this was sunshine in a bowl. Ambrosia salad, the pride of the South and the joy of every potluck table from Florida to Ohio. You'd see it glistening in a glass dish, piled high like a snowbank kissed with coconut. The scent alone, a swirl of citrus and cream, could transport you to warmer places even when snow pressed against the window panes. Each spoonful was a little miracle. Mandarin oranges, pineapple chunks, coconut flakes, and miniature marshmallows folded together in sweet whipped cream. It was a riot of texture, soft, chewy, juicy, and airy, a holiday cloud that somehow tasted like nostalgia itself. In the 60s, housewives clipped the recipe from Better Homes and Gardens, proud to serve something tropical in the dead of December. A can of fruit cocktail cost maybe 39 cents, but it felt like luxury, a touch of Florida sunshine brought north. Ambrosia wasn't just dessert, it was comfort. You'd scoop a little on your plate next to the ham, pretending it was salad, though everyone knew it was candy in disguise. Grandma swore their version was the right way, and everyone argued about marshmallow counts. But when that sweet, creamy chill hit your tongue, the room went quiet. That's how you knew it was Christmas. Cornflake crusted chicken. Before air fryers and fancy coatings, there was good old-fashioned ingenuity and a box of Kellogg's cornflakes. Mom would pour them into a plastic bag and crush them by hand with a rolling pin. The satisfying crackle echoing through the kitchen like firewood snapping in the hearth. Then came the chicken, dipped in milk or beaten eggs, rolled through the golden crumbs, and laid on a greased metal tray that had seen 100 Sunday dinners. The smell while it baked, pure heaven. That mix of toasted cereal and sizzling fat filled the house, making the windows fog up. When it came out of the oven, the crust was crisp and flaky, golden brown, crunchy on the outside, juicy on the inside. Back in the 1950s, turkey was a once-a-year luxury for many families. But cornflake chicken gave Christmas dinner the same sense of feast and celebration without breaking the bank. Served with condensed cream of mushroom gravy or a dollop of mashed potatoes, it felt like $1,000,000. Dads would grin, kids would reach for seconds, and no one cared that it came from a cereal box. It was simple, clever, and downright tasty. The kind of homemade brilliance that made American kitchens sparkle with pride and the comforting hum of "we made do and made it delicious." Pineapple ham towers. There was something almost cinematic about a baked ham studded with cloves and draped in golden pineapple rings. The moment the oven door opened, that syrupy, smoky aroma filled the air, wrapping around you like a warm memory. Each slice glistened with caramelized sugar and fruit juice, the edges crisping just enough to catch the light. Born in the 1950s heyday of canned fruit and Hawaiian flair, this dish was the centerpiece of countless Christmas tables. Housewives learned it from Betty Crocker pamphlets or Ladies' Home Journal, proud of its tropical touch, a little island dream in a winter wonderland. pineapple rings, maraschino cherries in their centers, and a glaze of brown sugar or Coca-Cola. Yes, Coca-Cola. The hiss as it hit the pan was music to the ears of every home cook trying something modern. For kids, it was the taste of sweet and savory magic. That sticky bite where the pineapple met the ham was pure holiday alchemy. For adults, it meant abundance. The kind of meal that said, "We're doing all right this year." The whole street could smell it baking, and you knew someone's home was filled with love, laughter, and maybe a few too many cloves. A dish like that didn't just feed the family, it fed the spirit of the season. Ribbon sandwich loaf. Now this one was pure showmanship. The ribbon sandwich loaf wasn't just food. It was performance art in a Pyrex dish. Picture it, a neat rectangular loaf of soft white bread, its sides frosted with cream cheese like a cake. Then when you sliced into it, surprise! Layers of pastel spreads appeared like festive stripes. Pink beet juice cream, green olive filling, maybe even a golden egg salad tier. It looked like something straight out of a 1958 church cookbook, the kind that called every potluck a luncheon. These loaves were status symbols, a hostess's chance to prove her creative flair. You'd see them at baby showers, Christmas teas, and those gatherings where everyone wore their good pearls and swapped recipes written in fountain pen. The taste, let's be honest, a little odd. Creamy, tangy, a bit salty, a bit sweet, but it didn't matter. The beauty was the point. It was America's edible optimism, built layer by layer, just like the dreams of the post-war years. People marveled as each slice revealed its candy-colored secrets, and someone always said, "Now that's something." Sure, today it might raise eyebrows, but back then it raised spirits. It was a reminder that celebration wasn't about perfection. It was about presentation, pride, and the sheer joy of making something memorable for the table. Divinity candy. There was a time when the sound of a hand mixer on Christmas Eve meant only one thing. Someone was making divinity. That fluffy white confection that looked like a cloud and melted like one too. Grandma would stand by the stove, hair pinned up, eyes locked on that bubbling sugar syrup, waiting for it to reach hardball stage. No candy thermometer? No problem. She'd drop a spoonful into cold water and judge it by instinct, like some kind of kitchen alchemist. When the hot syrup met the whipped egg whites, the whole kitchen smelled of vanilla and sugar, and maybe a hint of burnt patience. The texture was soft, yet chewy, like a snowdrift that decided to stick around. Some folks stirred in pecans or candied cherries, others shaped them into little peaks that looked like winter mountains. If it rained that day, hell help you. The humidity could ruin the batch. But when it turned out right, divinity wasn't just candy, it was a small Christmas miracle. A bite of purity, sweetness, and the kind of homemade pride you could taste. It was the candy that said, "We didn't have much, but what we had, we made with love." Date nut bread. Ah, date nut bread. The humble little loaf that somehow carried the whole warmth of the season inside it. You'd spot it cooling on the counter, baked in a repurposed coffee tin or a worn metal pan, filling the kitchen with the cozy smell of brown sugar and toasted walnuts. The texture was dense, rich, and sweet, with chewy bites of dates that gave each slice a gentle, honeyed stickiness. In the 1940s and 50s, this was the gift bread. Folks would wrap it in wax paper, tie it with red string, and hand it to neighbors with a smile. No Amazon boxes, no mass-produced sweets, just a loaf baked by hand, probably while Bing Crosby crooned from a nearby radio. A can of dates cost about 29 cents, but the memory it made was priceless. You'd slice it thick, slather it with cream cheese, and enjoy it with a cup of percolated coffee or cocoa. It was hearty enough to feel like breakfast, sweet enough to count as dessert. And when you shared it, you weren't just giving food. You were giving time, care, and the scent of Christmas itself. These days, it's rare to see a date nut loaf at the table, but one whiff of it and you're 10 years old again, sitting by the fire with crumbs on your mittens. Molasses cookies. If gingerbread was the showstopper, molasses cookies were the soul. Big, soft, and cracked just right on top. They were the kind of cookie that left fingerprints of sugar on your sweater and comfort in your heart. The smell, deep, spicy, with a whisper of clove and dark sweetness, could turn even the coldest night warm. These weren't fancy cookies, no icing, no glitter, just a dough mixed by hand, a splash of Grandma's blackstrap molasses, and the kind of patience that only came from women who'd lived through the Depression. In the 1930s, sugar was precious, but molasses was cheap, and it gave cookies that chewy, rich texture we still crave today. When they baked, the edges caramelized ever so slightly, and the centers stayed soft. You'd pull one apart and feel that warmth on your fingertips. Dunk it in milk, cocoa, or your granddad's coffee, and suddenly the world slowed down. These cookies tasted like honesty, like stories told around the kitchen table. Every bite whispered of thrift and tenderness, proof that sweetness doesn't need wealth, just love and a little molasses. Sugar-crusted snowballs. You didn't need snow outside when you had these little beauties on the table. Sugar-crusted snowballs, also called Mexican wedding cookies or Russian tea cakes, were a Christmas classic long before anyone thought about gluten-free diets. Buttery, crumbly, and rolled in powdered sugar until they looked like tiny snowdrifts, they were the kind of treat that melted before you even chewed. The recipe was simple: butter, flour, vanilla, and chopped pecans. That's it. Yet somehow they tasted like joy itself. The air would fill with the nutty scent as they baked, and once they cooled just enough, you'd toss them in powdered sugar, and that's when the kitchen turned into a snowstorm. Powder flew everywhere, on your hands, on your sweater, sometimes on the cat, but nobody cared. That was part of the fun. Each bite was a burst of nostalgia, soft, crumbly, sweet, and gone in 2 seconds flat. You'd pop one after another while pretending you were helping in the kitchen. And when the plate was empty, there was always one last puff of sugar left behind. A little dusting of Christmas magic that said, "See you next year." Cranberry chiffon pie. Just one look at that pink, cloud-like slice, and you knew this wasn't your average pie. Cranberry chiffon was a darling of the 1950s, a dessert that looked like a dream and tasted even lighter. Housewives clipped the recipe from Better Homes and Gardens or Good Housekeeping, thrilled by its modern appeal. After all, who wouldn't want a pie that floated instead of sat? It started with tart cranberry sauce, beaten smooth and bright, then folded into whipped cream and gelatin until it reached that perfect airy consistency. The crust, graham cracker or flaky pastry, added just enough crunch to remind you it was still dessert, not a cloud. When it hit the fridge, it chilled into something elegant and refreshing, the kind of dessert that sparkled under holiday lights. Its color alone, that soft, rosy pink, made it a showpiece on the table, nestled between the pumpkin pies and cookie tins. The first bite was pure nostalgia, sweet, tangy, and impossibly light. It was the taste of mid-century hope, when everything was whipped, jellied, or molded, and America believed in brighter, prettier holidays. Cranberry chiffon pie was dessert as optimism, and every airy spoonful whispered, "Tomorrow will be even sweeter." Roast goose. Before the supermarket turkey took over every holiday ad, roast goose was the real Christmas showpiece. You could hear the sizzle as the fat hit the roasting pan, smell that rich, savory aroma curling through the whole house, and feel the warmth radiating from the oven door. It wasn't just dinner, it was an event. Goose was old-fashioned even by the 1950s, a dish that carried whispers of Dickens and candlelight. Back then, a plump goose might cost around $4.25. Not cheap, but worth every penny. The skin roasted to a crisp golden brown, and the meat underneath was dark, juicy, and full of flavor, the kind that made you close your eyes after the first bite. Grandma would save the rendered goose fat in a jar, swearing it made the best fried potatoes you'd ever taste. This was a meal for big families and small kitchens, for laughter echoing over the clatter of plates. The smell alone could make the neighbors jealous. Nowadays, few people bother roasting one. Too much effort, too much grease. But back then, that grease was flavor, and that flavor was love. You didn't just eat goose, you celebrated it. And when it came to Christmas dinner, that golden bird meant you'd made it through another year. Together. Tomato aspic. Now here's one that divided families right down the middle. Tomato aspic. Half salad, half science experiment, and wholly unforgettable. Imagine a wobbly red mold, set like Jell-O, but tasting faintly of ketchup and spice. It sounds strange today, sure, but in the mid-20th century, it was the height of sophistication. Ladies in the 50s would serve it on crisp lettuce leaves, sometimes topped with mayonnaise or shrimp. The recipe came from glossy magazines promising modern elegance. Tomato juice, lemon, celery salt, and a packet of gelatin, whisked and chilled until it held its shape like a Christmas miracle. The first bite was cool, tangy, and savory, a bright contrast to heavy roasts and gravies. Folks said it cleansed the palate, though kids usually just called it weird. Still, every potluck had one. It gleamed like a ruby centerpiece, proud and mysterious. It was the dish that made guests whisper, "Now that's something different." Today, it's nearly vanished, replaced by simpler salads and less gelatin. But for those who remember it, Tomato aspic brings back an era when every recipe felt like a little adventure, and when fancy was something you could make with a can of juice and a lot of faith in Jello. Potato stuffing. If you grew up anywhere near Pennsylvania Dutch country, you probably remember this: potato stuffing, that humble masterpiece that made turkey jealous. Unlike the bread cubes most folks know, this stuffing was built on mashed potatoes, soft, buttery, seasoned with onions, celery, and a pinch of sage. When baked, it formed a crispy golden crust on top with creamy comfort beneath. The scent was out of this world, roasted onions mingling with butter and herbs, seeping through every corner of the house. Families passed down the recipe like an heirloom, always slightly different. A little more milk here, an extra egg there. It wasn't about perfection, it was about heart. In the 1940s and 50s, you'd see it served alongside turkey or ham, piled high on chipped china plates. It was filling, affordable, and, in a time when waste was unthinkable, made smart use of leftover potatoes. But more than that, it tasted like home. One spoonful could transport you right back to Grandma's kitchen. The warmth of the oven on your face, the hum of conversation behind you, and the sense that no matter how small the house or tight the budget, the table was rich. Because when there was potato stuffing, there was love in the room. Coca-Cola glazed ham. Oh, you could smell it before you even walked in the door. That sweet, smoky perfume of a ham glazed in Coca-Cola. A true Southern gem that spread across America faster than the beverage itself. Housewives discovered it in the 50s, clipping the recipe from Coca-Cola's own holiday ads. Add sparkle to your Christmas table. The secret was simple. Pour a bottle of Coke over your ham, sprinkle brown sugar and cloves, then bake it slow and steady. The soda caramelized into a sticky glaze, bubbling and crackling until it formed a candy-like crust. When sliced, the meat shimmered, tender, smoky, and kissed with sweetness. You'd hear that faint hiss as the cola hit the hot pan, and every head in the house would turn. The scent alone could make a preacher skip his sermon. It wasn't gourmet, it was pure Americana, born of thrift and creativity. Back then, Coke was about 25 cents a bottle, but in the oven, it became liquid gold. Families gathered around, eyes wide, forks ready. Kids loved the glaze, grown-ups loved the nostalgia. It was a dish that said, we made something special out of something simple. And in that shiny caramel-coated ham, you could taste the joy of the American kitchen. Fizzy, sweet, and unforgettable. Oyster dressing. For coastal families, especially in the South and along the eastern seaboard, Christmas wasn't complete with oyster dressing. Not stuffing, mind you, dressing. A savory blend of cornbread, onions, and celery, baked with briny oysters that tasted like the sea itself. The smell was bold, buttery, and oceanic, with herbs and spice wafting from the oven. The texture was everything, crisp at the edges, creamy in the middle, each bite carrying that unmistakable kiss of salt water. It was the kind of dish that connected you straight to tradition, a recipe older than the century, passed down through generations of cooks who didn't measure so much as eyeball it. In the 1950s, oysters were cheap and plentiful, sold by the pint at local fish markets. Housewives would mix them into cornbread batter, pour it into a cast-iron skillet, and bake it to golden perfection. The sound of that skillet clanging onto the stove meant the feast was about to begin. It wasn't everyone's favorite. Kids sometimes wrinkled their noses at the fishy smell. But it was sacred to those who grew up with it. Oyster dressing was more than food. It was heritage on a plate, a reminder that Christmas meant family, flavor, and a taste of the coast no matter how far inland you lived. Creamed onions. If you were a kid in the 50s or 60s, you might remember these little white pearls swimming in a pool of creamy goodness, creamed onions. The dish was simple, elegant, and just a little bit mysterious to younger taste buds. You'd see it glide out of the kitchen in a casserole dish, steaming and glossy, sprinkled with a pinch of black pepper. The smell was delicate: butter, milk, and just a hint of nutmeg. The kind of scent that clung softly to the curtains after dinner. Every forkful was tender and velvety, the onions melting on your tongue like buttered snow. This was the side dish your grandmother made, not because it was trendy, but because it was proper. A real holiday dinner, she'd say, needs creamed onions. They weren't flashy. They didn't sparkle like Jell-O or shimmer like cranberry sauce. But they had old-world charm. The kind of recipe born in New England kitchens and carried across generations. In those days, cooking wasn't about impressing anyone. It was about keeping traditions alive. And somewhere between the mashed potatoes and the stuffing, those humble onions reminded everyone that even the simplest things could taste like love, especially when shared at a crowded Christmas table. Candied sweet potatoes. Now this was the dish that made you sneak back to the table after dinner for just one more bite. Candied sweet potatoes, soft, sticky, and kissed with toasted marshmallows, were pure Christmas comfort. When the oven door opened, that sugary scent of caramelized brown sugar and butter filled every corner of the house, mixing with the smell of pine needles and wrapping paper. Before fancy desserts and store-bought pies, this was the sweet heart of the meal. Housewives in the 50s made it from scratch. Sweet potatoes boiled, sliced, and baked in a syrupy glaze of brown sugar, cinnamon, and sometimes a splash of orange juice for a little sparkle. And then came the finale. A fluffy blanket of marshmallows browned just right on top, soft and golden, like snow toasted by candlelight. It didn't matter if you called it a side or a dessert. It was heaven either way. Kids would fight over the edges where the syrup turned to caramel, and every spoonful felt like a memory wrapped in sugar. Even today, one bite can pull you straight back to that candle-lit dining room, with Bing Crosby crooming in the background, and Grandma's laughter mingling with the crackle of the fireplace. Green bean casserole. Ah, the green bean casserole. The quiet hero of the American holiday table. Creamy, crunchy and comforting. It wasn't born from a family heirloom, but from pure 1950s ingenuity. In 1955, Dorcas Riley of the Campbell Soup Company whipped it up in a test kitchen, hoping to sell a few extra cans of cream of mushroom soup. Instead, she created a national treasure. You could find it in nearly every home come Christmas. A bubbling dish of tender green beans folded in creamy soup, topped with those golden fried onions that made everyone's mouth water. The sound of the spoon cracking that crispy top was enough to make you pause mid-conversation. It wasn't fancy, but it didn't have to be. It was the dish that brought everyone together, a reminder that great food didn't need to be complicated. Moms loved it because it was easy, kids loved it because it was crunchy, and dads loved it because it showed up warm every single year without fail. Even today, one whiff of that creamy mushroom aroma can send you right back to a linoleum-floored kitchen where the radio played Perry Como and the world outside was wrapped in snow. Green bean casserole wasn't just food. It was consistency, comfort, and the very spirit of togetherness. Congealed cranberry salad. Now this was a dish that could stop you in your tracks. Bright, ruby red, quivering like stained glass in the light. Congealed cranberry salad, they called it. Half art project, half side dish. It was a holiday staple from the Midwest to the South, and no Christmas buffet was complete with its glistening presence. Made from canned cranberry sauce, crushed pineapple, chopped nuts, and sometimes even celery. Yes, celery. It was suspended in Jell-O and chilled until firm. When the mold was finally turned out, it stood there proud, a wobbly monument to mid-century creativity. The first forkful was tart and sweet all at once, that little crunch of pecan sneaking in like a surprise. Grandma might have served it on a bed of iceberg lettuce, maybe with a dollop of mayonnaise or whipped cream on top, a combination that made perfect sense back then. It was festive, it was fun, and it reflected a time when presentation was half the joy of cooking. People admired it before they ate it. Cameras flashed, well, Polaroids clicked, and everyone oohed and ahed before digging in. Sure, today it might make the younger crowd raise an eyebrow, but one bite, one sweet, tangy, nostalgic bite, and you'd remember why every table once had room for a little cranberry wobble. Celery with pimento cheese. Before cheese boards and charcuterie platters took over Pinterest, there was the simplest party starter of them all, celery sticks filled with pimento cheese. Cold, crisp, and a little bit zesty, they were the first thing to vanish from the appetizer tray at every holiday gathering. You'd hear the gentle crunch as someone bit into one, followed by that creamy, tangy flavor that made you go back for seconds. The cheese, a mix of shark cheddar, mayonnaise, and diced pimentos, was made by hand, not store-bought in a plastic tub. It was bright orange, smooth, and spread with love by someone wearing a holiday apron and a smile. It wasn't fancy, but it didn't need to be. This was the kind of finger food that spoke of simpler times, when hospitality meant opening your door, not curating an aesthetic. The celery's cool snap against the rich cheese was pure perfection. In the 1960s, every bridge club, church luncheon, and Christmas open house had a platter of these on the table. They were practical, colorful, and utterly American. One bite, and you could almost hear the clinking of punch glasses, the rustle of wrapping paper, and the laughter of friends who'd been stopping by just for a minute since noon. Hot buttered rum. Now this was the drink that wrapped you up like a flannel blanket on a snowy night. Hot buttered rum, smooth, sweet, and just strong enough to make your cheeks glow. You could smell it before you saw it, that buttery brown sugar aroma curling through the living room, mingling with pine and the faint crackle of the record player. Grandpa would stir it slowly, wooden spoon clinking against the old glass mug, as the butter melted into the dark spiced rum and boiling water. A sprinkle of cinnamon on top, maybe a twist of orange peel if he was feeling fancy. It was a drink that wasn't about getting tipsy. It was about feeling warm, right down to your bones. In the 50s and 60s, this was the unofficial nightcap of Christmas Eve. The grown-ups would sip theirs while Bing Crosby crooned softly, the kids already half asleep on the couch, their faces glowing in the tree lights. It tasted like relaxation, like finally exhaling after weeks of hustle and holiday shopping. These days, you'll rarely see it served, but one sip could bring it all back. The laughter, the flicker of tinsel, and the hush of snowfall outside. Hot buttered rum wasn't just a drink, it was comfort, poured steaming into a mug that warmed your hands and your heart all at once. Eggnog from scratch. Forget the store cartons. Real eggnog was an act of love. The kind that took whisking, patience, and a good bit of trust in Grandma's kitchen instincts. Raw eggs, heavy cream, sugar, and a splash or three of bourbon or rum, all beaten together until frothy and smooth. When poured into a glass punch bowl, it looked like liquid velvet, with a dusting of nutmeg dancing on top. The first sip was a revelation, cold, creamy, and just sweet to make you sigh. It was the taste of celebration itself. In the 1940s and 50s, every family had their own version. Some spiked it strong, others kept it tame for the kids. But no matter the recipe, eggnog meant togetherness. You'd find it at every Christmas party, served in tiny glass cups with little handles. Folks would clink them like champagne, smiling with that "we made it through another year" kind of pride. Sure, the thought of raw eggs might make modern folks cringe, but back then, nobody blinked. They just trusted Grandma's farm-fresh confidence. One whiff of that mix of cream, vanilla, and nutmeg, and suddenly you were back under the mistletoe, laughing with family, the record player spinning softly. Eggnog wasn't just a drink. It was the flavor of Christmas cheer itself. Mulled cider. There was nothing, and I mean nothing, like walking into a house that smelled of mulled cider on a cold December night. That sweet, spicy perfume of apples, cloves, and cinnamon sticks simmering on the stove was the unofficial scent of Christmas gatherings everywhere. In the 60s and 70s, it was the drink that united everyone. No alcohol, no fuss, just warmth and love in a cup. Mom would fill the old enamel pot with cider, toss in a handful of cinnamon sticks, a few orange slices, maybe a couple of star anise if she had them, and let it bubble all afternoon. The sound of it simmering was like the house breathing, calm, content, alive. You'd hold the mug in both hands, letting the steam warm your face, the first sip tangling your tongue with spice and comfort. It was the kind of drink that didn't just taste good, it felt good. You could almost taste the laughter of cousins, the rustle of wrapping paper, and the clink of ornaments as someone adjusted the tree. Even now, if you close your eyes and catch that scent, apples and cinnamon, it's like flipping through a family photo album you can smell. Mulled cider wasn't just a drink. It was a memory steeped in sweetness and time. Peppermint ice cream. Every December, just as the air turned sharp and the lights went up, the ice cream shops would bring it out. Peppermint ice cream. A pink and white swirl of pure holiday joy. Even the sight of it made you smile. You'd pop open the carton and see flecks of crushed candy cane glinting like tiny jewels in a sea of pastel cream. The first spoonful hit cool and sweet, then melted into that signature peppermint tangle that made your tongue dance. It was the dessert of choice for those who liked their Christmas with a little chill. A perfect pairing with a slice of chocolate cake or a mug of cocoa. In the 50s and 60s, local dairies sold it only during the holidays, so folks waited all year. A quart might have cost just 50 cents, but it tasted like luxury. Kids would press their noses to the freezer glass, pointing at it like treasure. Some families even served it after Christmas dinner, scooped high in crystal dishes that clinked softly with every spoon. One bite could transport you. The crunch of peppermint, the hum of laughter, the glow of the tree in the corner. It was festive, simple, and fleeting. A once-a-year treat that somehow tasted like the sparkle of Christmas lights themselves. Fruitcake done right. Ah, fruitcake, the most misunderstood dessert in America. Today, it's the punchline of 100 jokes, but once upon a time, it was the jewel of the holiday table. The real deal wasn't a brick. It was a masterpiece. Dense, rich, heavy with butter and brown sugar, packed with nuts, cherries, and candied fruit that gleamed like stained glass. The secret was patience. The good fruitcakes were baked weeks in advance, then wrapped in cheesecloth and brushed with rum or brandy every few days. The smell that came out of that tin when you opened it, oh my stars! Warm spice, citrus peel, and just a whisper of whiskey. In the 1940s through the 60s, it was a mark of pride. You didn't buy your fruitcake, you aged it like fine wine. Grandma would slice it thin, her knife gliding through its dark, sticky crumb, and pass it around like an heirloom. The first bite was bold, sweet, spiced, a little boozy, a little chewy. It tasted like Christmas condensed into a single bite. And those who've had a real one know, fruitcake, when done right, wasn't a joke at all. It was tradition, craftsmanship, and a labor of love that lasted long after the tree came down. The snow has quieted now, and somewhere in the distance a car radio hums an old familiar carol. The dishes are washed, the table cleared, but the air still carries that unmistakable perfume of butter, spice, and something sweeter, memory. We've wandered through kitchens of the past, through decades when Christmas dinner wasn't about perfection, but about people. When a wobbly Jell-O mold could make kids giggle. When the hum of a percolator meant another story was about to be told. And when every dish, no matter how strange or simple, had a place on the table because it had a place in someone's heart. These forgotten recipes weren't just food. They were the language of family. A mother's way of saying, "I love you," in buttercream. A grandmother's way of passing down her patience through a wooden spoon. Even the smallest things, a celery stick filled with pimento cheese or a single snowball cookie dusted with sugar, carried the weight of tradition and the warmth of belonging. Maybe we moved too fast. Maybe we traded handmade for prepackaged and Sunday roasts for microwave dinners. But the beauty of memory is that it can always be reheated. The recipes might have faded from the cookbooks, but they're still alive, tucked inside us, waiting to be tasted again. So this year, maybe it's time to bring one back. Bake that molasses cookie, stir that Divinity candy, dust off Grandma's fruitcake tin. Because the moment you do, you'll feel it, that quiet magic that only comes once a year. When the lights twinkle, the laughter softens, and the scent of something sweet fills the house again. The dishes may have changed, but the heart behind them never has. It's the same love, the same joy, the same simple truth. Christmas isn't about what's on the table, it's about who's around it. So here's to those flavors we've forgotten and the memories we never will.